Hey, folks, welcome back to the Processing Blue podcast. I'm Panthers beat reporter Mike Kay, joined by fellow Panthers beat reporter Alex Zutlow, and we are here to talk about an absolute dismantling.
Let's go.
Carolina Panthers. I mean, what could be said about this game other than complete and utter disaster? And I'm here to start off the podcast by falling on my sword and saying I was absolutely wrong. I predicted the Panthers would win. I threw some shade at the Saints for their aging defense. They were phenomenal. They played extremely well. Clint Kubiak was terrific as an offensive play caller in his debut as the Saints offensive coordinator. They put a whooping on the Panthers. And, you know, I think sometimes we get caught up in watching the same defense go up against the same offense. And I was encouraged by the last 3 weeks of practice. I thought there was a chance that a week one weirdness could affect this game and they could come out with a close win. I was wrong. They lost by 37 points. That was, in 10 years as a beat writer, that was easily the worst one-sided, lopsided defeat of a team that I've ever covered. And weirdly,
and wait, and Mike, show your credentials real quick. You were in Jacksonville during the Urban Meyer year.
I was not there during the Urban Meyer year, thank God. But I was there during the Gus Bradley years, and those were tough. I was also in Philadelphia during the COVID year where they fired a Super Bowl winning head coach. So I've seen some pretty bad football. That took the cake. I mean, last year was rough. If it continues to be like what it was in week one, oh boy, strap on your seatbelts, kids, because this is going to be a really, really bumpy ride. But with that said, let's kind of get into it. 47-10. The Panthers were down 17-0 before Bryce Young completed a pass to somebody who wasn't on the Saints. The defense allowed 180 rushing yards. Derek Carr just cut them up through the air in the first half, ended up with 3 touchdown passes. They had abject failures in all 3 phases. But other than that, they survived. I guess that's the bright side there. But as we get into that, Alex, I want to talk about what went wrong in New Orleans. Special teams, right off the bat, they had a punt blocked. The Saints were not afraid to kick off to them, and they didn't really kind of take advantage when you consider that a touchback would have been 30 would have gotten them to their own 30, and they averaged less than 30 in returns. That's called math. But let's talk about the offense and defense. Alex, I'm going to give you the offense. I'll take the defense. What do you got? What went wrong on offense?
Well, to quote the Carolina Panthers philosopher Xavier Woods, everything. And he was talking, obviously Xavier Woods is a veteran safety on the defense, and he was talking about the defense specifically. But everything went wrong for the Panthers on all 3 phases, and it's very difficult when you're trying to tackle a game like this. It's super difficult to pinpoint, okay, what exactly can the Panthers learn from this? Because when everything goes wrong, you can't improvement is difficult. Like it's just a massive thing to try to like bite off and chew and digest and whatever. Now that weird metaphor is over, let's talk about the offense. The thing that bothers me most about this offense is the turnovers. And I know I'll talk a little bit more about turnovers in a second, but particularly as it pertains to Bryce Young. But just you can't lose the turnover battle in such a way in week one. You can't go the first pass, your first play from scrimmage is an interception, particularly after the defense gives up a touchdown. You can't go your second pass of the second half being an interception. You can't have on a pretty interesting end around play for Jonathan Mingo, I think still in the first half, that actually yields some pretty good yards. You can't turn that into a fumble and a fumble loss to the Saints. And then I mean, and then of course, Jonathan Mingo also almost fumbled again while the Panthers were threatening in the end zone, which that drive ultimately yielded the team's first touchdown and only touchdown of the game. That could have very easily been a fumble if Jonathan didn't have his hand on the ball while his foot grazed the out of bounds line. That is the most difficult thing to process, I think. I thought the play calling was actually kind of interesting, as Mike, you alluded to in today's mailbag. Like I said, there was the end around, the passing play calls like seemed to make sense. That first pass, the one that was picked off where Bryce Young kind of overthrew Deontay Johnson, if the play works out well, Adam Thielen is streaking up the field and supposed to take away safety help. And Deontay Johnson has a one-on-one on a crossing route right in the middle of the field for Bryce Young to plant his foot, step up, and throw it. If Bryce connects with Deontay on that play, who knows how far Deontay's running after that. So I don't think it was an issue with the play calling. Dave Canales did catch some heat in Monday's Monday's presser about the play distribution, about how the team only ran the ball 20 times and 4 of them were scrambles from Bryce Young. But the team was down 17-0 before they made their first completion. It's so the play distribution is gonna be all messed up after that. So Dave even mentioned that, like, hey, we didn't really get a chance to show like who we truly are in the run game because we were down so much so quickly. So not to beat a dead horse about this, but the turnovers were unacceptable, and it just made the offense super clunky, and it made it difficult for us to even tell what the Panthers are, who the Panthers are, what the Panthers have. But that does not abstain the offense from such a poor performance, the turnovers. And turnovers also doesn't abstain the defense from such a bad game. Mike, what'd you see on the defensive side?
Well, they allowed 9 straight scoring drives. 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's a lot. That is a lot. when you're scoring on everything you touch from the first to the third quarter, you're going to have a good day. And if you're on the opposite side of that, you're going to have a rough flight home. And look, the Saints did a really nice job of playing complementary offense. They ran the ball effectively. They passed the ball effectively. They didn't ask Derek Carr to do too much. Obviously, that first touchdown was a breakdown in coverage between Jordan Fuller and J.C. Horn. Carr got really good protection. He was only sacked once, and really that was a scramble for a loss of 1 yard, if we're being honest. And so I think what happened defensively is just like they were so behind the 8 ball that it just felt like they were suffocating. Obviously, we know the news comes out that Derek Brown suffered a meniscus injury, but he still played a majority of the snaps. So I don't even know if you can use that as an excuse. There were guys running into each other, tackling each other. Just so you know, they were in white uniforms and the Saints were not. But I mean, there was a lot of tackling of white uniforms.
Like there was literally one play, if I can remember correctly, where Alvin Kamara was just running to the left, and a linebacker tripped over Josie Jewell, who tripped over another guy. It was like dominoes.
Well, I'm wearing a Donkey Kong shirt, and like the old Donkey Kong, it was kind of like the barrels. Kind of like, I mean, somebody posted the video and was like, I've never seen anything like this before. And I quote tweeted it and said, "You've never been bowling?" Like, that's what it was like. I mean, it was really, it was like a, woo, you know what I mean? Like, it was like a Follies. There used to be those videos, Sports Follies, that would have made the cut easily. Defensively, there was a lot of turnover this offseason. Obviously, losing Brian Burns, Frankie Louvu. They bring in A'Shawn Robinson, Josie Jewell, Jordan Fuller, Nick Scott, Mike Jackson. All these guys who have familiarity with either the front office or the coaching staff. And then they bring in Jadeveon Clowney, who, by and large, has been a great run stopper throughout his career. And they got run over to the tune of 180 yards for 4.9 yards per carry. 3 of their 10 biggest explosive plays were, over 14 yards on the ground. They didn't tackle well. A'Shaun Robinson and Jadeveon Clowney specifically were supposed to help this run defense. And listen, like once the Saints got up big, I mean, they were up 30-3 at halftime. They scored 30 consecutive points to start the game. Like they just pinned their ears back and just ran all over them. And I think it worked and it was effective. I think this game is really tough to analyze and project because very few blowouts like this happen in week one, especially, in the league period, but especially in week one. And so I think there's going to be a lot of chatter this week, and it's warranted. They should be criticized as much as humanly possible. I made the reference to Temple of Doom where the guy gets his heart ripped out of his chest. He's still alive, and then he gets thrown into lava. That's kind of what the entire Panthers squad went through on Sunday. That said, as our fill-in producer, Diamond, a beat writer.
Our lovely fill-in producer.
You just ruined my nickname that I was just going to, Diamond is a beat writer's best friend. She's wonderful. Yeah. Anyway, but, she's probably not used to this, but Alex interrupts me all the time when I'm in the middle of something great. You can comment on that later in the section. Anyway.
Please note the fact that I rolled my eyes to the back of my head and
you can hear it in the room. Anyway, but Alex, there's when everyone fails, it's kind of a good thing because nobody really can point fingers and be like, yo, you're the reason why I lost, or man, this is all in the offense, or this is all in the defense. So I think culturally this shouldn't rattle them that much. But I would say operationally, I would be very concerned if I were in that coaching staff because you go through this summer, you feel like you're prepared, you don't do a lot in the preseason, you think that you're doing things the right way, and oh, by the way, reality smacks you in the face and says, no, this was horrible. And I think when we talk about this team moving forward, and we've talked about it before, it's all about Bryce, as much as they want to kind of bat that down and say no. I think we kind of need to talk about the biggest concern with Bryce because right now he's got a big yellow highlighter over his name of, hey, he's part of the problem. And it's very easy to see that he had the worst performance of his career. So with that said, I ask you, you brought up the turnovers, Alex.
Mm-hmm.
What was the biggest concern you had about those turnovers?
It's a good question. Before I answer that particular question, because it's real good, you say that when everyone fails, it's good for the culture because not everyone can point their finger at one person. Well, can someone tell that to Bryce Young? Because everything that I've seen is everyone is pointing at Bryce Young saying, they're treating this disaster as a Bryce Young failure, which –
well, I would say internally. I'm not saying – you're saying externally.
I'm saying externally, yeah.
Okay. Just wanted to make that clear.
Yeah, you're saying internally, I guess. But externally, all of this loss is being felt by Bryce. It's pretty remarkable. And the turnovers are my most concerning part about Bryce Young's game. If I want to drill down into that a little bit, it is his decision-making after the ball has been snapped. I was not expecting this. I was not expecting Bryce to be out of the pocket where he is kind of shown his most creative side, where he's been the best in his career, and to not really know what to do. He was aggressive when he should have been more careful. He was a little careful when he should have been more aggressive. He was still sacked for 4 times for 26 yards. Obviously, he threw the 2 picks. The first one was, I think, the most egregious because he had Deontay open over the middle. He overthrew a lot of passes too. After the ball was snapped, we didn't see accurate Bryce. We didn't see creative Bryce, and that led to turnovers, and that certainly hamstrung this offense. So, I could keep going on about it, but just post-snap Bryce was not up to par. It was not good. And that's the stuff that fans see. And so that's why fans were piling onto him. Something that fans don't see necessarily, though, is the pre-snap stuff with Bryce. Mike, what did you see from the pre-snap stuff?
That was an excellent segue, Alex.
Appreciate you.
Well, when a nickel corner is sacking you 3 times and leading the league in sacks, based on your ability to read pressure packages, not great. Not great. I do think that that's partially a coaching issue. I think that that's going to have to be really well taught over the next couple of weeks, especially with like Derwin James coming to town, and they're going to face a lot of talented secondaries. And I think when I look at this game, I look at what's kind of spiraled for them is that this Panthers team just doesn't look like they have everything all together, and now that's on coaching. But I would say from a Bryce Young standpoint, it just felt like he had never seen a nickel blitz before. And look, Austin Corbett took responsibility for some of the protection calls. They both kind of go back and forth. But something that we need to see, coming out of college, Bryce was known as a guy who could process really quickly and see the field despite his size and all this stuff. You didn't see that in this game, and that's part of the concern for me. But enough about Bryce for now. Let's talk about the defense. I mean, I think when we look at this, both the pass defense and the run defense were alarming. What bothers you the most, Alex?
Oh goodness. I think the first thing that comes to mind is the passing defense to me. And
you're so new age.
I know, but so let's just take the first touchdown pass of the game. All we see from, you were actually in the press box in New Orleans, and you had like a wonderful view of it, even if you might have gotten vertigo all the way up there.
Oh, I've got a headache to prove it. I had the headache to prove it afterwards.
But I was at home watching it on the broadcast view, and all I saw was Rashid Shaheed sprinting past J.C. Horn, which is something I wasn't expecting to see, and then Shaheed catching the ball and kind of stumbling into the end zone, and J.C. Horn smacking his thighs and being like, what's going on? How could this happen? I would later learn that it was a kind of a communication breakdown between him and the safeties, and it was also a communication of like a really good play design from the Saints. But like, how does that happen on the first drive? Particularly for a defensive backfield that last year was really good against the pass. Like, the issue last year wasn't against the pass for this defense. It was against the run. And the team didn't like necessarily lose a lot of talent in the defensive backfield. Yes, they lost Dante Jackson on the other side of J.C. Horn. And yes, they didn't have, but then at the same time, they didn't have J.C. Horn for most of the season last year. And they supposedly upgraded at the cornerback position this year with Mike Jackson, who actually did have a pretty decent game. But that's the thing that was so concerning to me. When you make Derek Carr look that good, and not to say maybe Derek Carr is set to have an MVP season. Who knows? It's week 1 of the NFL season. Who knows? But this is another thing where we can take our lumps. We both said the way the blueprint for the Panthers winning this game is Derek Carr. It is putting the game in Derek Carr's hands and seeing what could happen. Well, the Panthers did. They did it early, and Derek Carr kind of sliced them up, which was concerning. So like, I could get into the details of like, the safeties weren't communicating well with the cornerbacks. Could that have been because they hadn't played that long together? Maybe, but then you got the preseason to work out. But then you got the preseason. Oh, well, why didn't y'all play more in the preseason? And then players would come back and say, yeah, well, like, we're only going to get 3 series total in the preseason as starters anyway. So what's the point of that? So are we just saying that like communication issues were unique to Carolina in week 1? I don't buy that, because the rest of the league was dealing with similar things. So kind of going off on a ramble here, but just, I mean, there wasn't much positives to take away from this defense. I was expecting the issue to be with the pass rush, but I mean, it was really the defensive backfield that caught my attention when it comes to worries of this whole thing. Mike, are you going to focus on the pass rush, or are you going to focus on somewhere else?
Well, I think the run defense was alarming simply because when you play teams that are kind of like middling or bad, and you allow them to be multidimensional, which means allow them to run the ball well, and pass, it's a problem. And I think, look, it was week 1. Tackling to the ground is still kind of new in when you're in the preseason, you're barely playing and you're not really tackling to the ground in training camp. That happens. But it just felt like no one knew where to be in their run fits. And that's a problem, especially when you brought in A'Shawn Robinson and Jadeveon Clowney, who I mentioned earlier, are really, really good run defenders. Mm. On top of that, now you're going to be without Derek Brown, who's probably going to be replaced by either Nick Thurman or LeBrian Ray, 2 guys they signed midway through training camp last year, and they were fine as backups last season. Shy Tuttle's not particularly good at run defense. Whatever. I think that that's a problem, especially when you have, J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards coming in next week, or this week, I guess, with the Chargers. We'll talk about them a little bit more, but when teams know they can run on you, they will run on you. And once they build a big lead by 10 points or more, they're going to run on you and run on you on more than a few occasions because they want to control the clock. They want to control the tempo of the game. And if the offense is giving away the ball, running the ball is owning the clock. And so you're taking advantage of not only the turnover to potentially score points, but you're draining the clock as well, most likely, and you're winning that time of possession. The Panthers were bested in time of possession, third down percentage, turnover battle. Just basically every category.
Explosive plays.
Yep. And when you can run the ball against a team and break their will midway through a game like that, it's really hard for them to be a functioning defense. I think part of the issue is when you want to play complementary football and one side of the coin is messed up, man, it can snowball. And I think that's what happened when they gave up that early passing touchdown. It just kind of felt like the rest of the defense kind of became lethargic and they got run over. With that said, though,
on that hopeful note.
On that hopeful note. Let's talk about the Chargers game. It's the home opener against the Chargers, who also have a new coach, but he's also a veteran coach, and he's coming off a national championship in college, Jim Harbaugh. The Chargers beat the Raiders, the Panthers' week 3 opponent, last week, 22-10. Here's something to look at, okay? They weren't great on third down on offense, but man, could they run the ball. They ran for 180 yards, didn't make, Justin Herbert, their quarterback, do all that much. They were 2 of 4 in the red zone. They were able to come away with field goals when they weren't successful on touchdown tries. It was a good, solid game plan. They didn't do anything particularly wild, but I think when we look at their ability on defense to stop the run, create some pressure, they got 4 sacks for 32 yards of loss on Gardner Minshew. They were able to create an interception. They held the Raiders to 71 yards on 22 carries for an average of 3.2 yards per carry. But J.K. Dobbins was really the story. He ran for 135 yards on just 10 carries, and he had a long of 61. I think that's going to be the story here, because if J.K. Dobbins can get off to a big start against this defensive front, missing Derek Brown, and putting together the performance that they did against the Saints, this game could get pretty ugly early. And Justin Herbert, while he's still very young, I would take him over Derek Carr any day of the week. So he can sling it. This is going to be a game that kind of is going to be hard to push back. I think Las Vegas is a much better matchup for the Panthers, but that's a week away. And so if you start off 0-2, the chances of making the playoffs from there are slim. We didn't expect them to make the playoffs after last week. I wouldn't even talk about the postseason or say it 3 times because it's not going to appear. But that said, the bleakness of the season, as that losing record starts to snowball, yikes.
Sorry, go.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. What you got?
Well, I was just going to say, I was going to pose this question to you. So I'm looking at the team rankings of the Chargers as they stack up on defense, they're really impressive after their week 1 win. They're number 2 in opponent points per game. They only allowed 10 points, as you mentioned. They're 13th in opponent yards per play at 5.0. Didn't allow a red zone scoring touchdown. Didn't allow any 4th down conversions. Or I guess the Raiders didn't run a 4th down play. Was that a function of Las Vegas not being an adept offense, or is there something to this Los Angeles Chargers defense that is formidable? And if they're formidable to another NFL team, they're certainly formidable to the Panthers.
Well, I think they're stacked with talent, right? Like Derwin James. I mean, the defense in general, Derwin James, Joey Bosa.
Yep.
There's talent everywhere. And so I think when you look at Asante Samuel, you look at Denzel Perryman, the former Panther, Khalil Mack. I mean, he had 1.5 sacks in this past game. Like, they're going to create pressure. Taylor Moton and Ike Ekwonu are going to have to pass block very, very well. Derwin James is another guy who can blitz. Like, this is going to be a team that does blitz, and they blitzed Gardner Minshew over a dozen times. They only got 1 sack off of it, but they're going to have exotic plays where they make things look one way, and you're going to have to figure out how to get out of it. I think the offense is interesting because they don't really have a lot of name weapons outside of Dobbins and obviously Herbert at quarterback. But I think they're the type of offense that can make plays that win the game. Like they're not a bad team. I think this team's improved because Harbaugh's a natural winner. He's a very good coach. He understands offense. He understands the quarterback position. And if that defense is playing as well as it did against the Raiders, you could see another 10-point Panthers game, which I think would be problematic for this team, especially after hiring an offensive, QB whisperer as their head coach and everything that's gone into it. I think the defense will play a little bit better against this Chargers team, but I don't know if the offense will be able to keep pace if the Chargers running game gets off to a quick start and they're able to put up points.
Mm. Yeah, totally.
I've also retired picking the Panthers until they win 2 games in a row. I will not. That will not happen. I am not doing that ever again. I was going to. So after the game the other day, I walked in dress shoes for 4 miles to go get food, and my toes are all sorts of messed up right now. So I can't run laps, but I can tell you I've paid my penance. That has happened. I have, I get it, man. If Saints fans want to trash me for what I said, totally deserved. Bring the heat. I was wrong. I'll own it. I'll be accountable like the Panthers locker room. Hopefully my prediction's better this week, even though it will not be in favor of the Panthers.
Okay, I think that's a great place to end. We will obviously provide our game predictions in our newsletter, which you should sign up for because it is free. All you have to do is go to the Charlotte Observer website, navigate to the newsletter page, click on Panthers headlines, and put your email in there. It's a fun conversational place where you can talk about Panthers and share all the stories that we've written throughout the week. So definitely do that. I normally kind of fit in a movie or book reference. Mike is hilarious and snarky as he always is. But yeah, that's it for this week. Thanks as always for listening to Processing Blue with Mike K and myself and our lovely fill-in producer Diamond. Please subscribe and follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts by searching our name, Processing Blue. And if you watch us on YouTube, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and click on the bell icon to get notified whenever new episodes drop. And finally, please be sure to stick to charlotteobserver.com for all your Panthers needs. Stay humble, stay creative, and keep processing.